What would you risk for a complete stranger? For Clara Evans, a 24-year-old waitress just trying to pay her rent, that question became terrifyingly real. She served coffee to a man who was quietly kind, a man she later learned was the billionaire Julian Croft. But it was his friend, the slick and charming Marcus Thorne, who made the hairs on her arms stand up. One rainy Tuesday, she overheard a conversation not meant for her ears, a conversation that spelled ruin for the quiet millionaire. She had a choice: stay silent and keep her job, or speak up and risk everything. She chose to speak. The next day, a black Bentley pulled up to her rundown apartment building, and her life was never the same again. The Silver Spoon Diner wasn't a place for dreams, it was a place for survival. It smelled perpetually of burnt coffee, sizzling bacon, and the faint, sweet scent of maple syrup clinging to the air like a ghost. For Clara Evans, it was the monotonous backdrop to her life. By day, she juggled plates, refilled coffees, and forced a smile for tired truckers and gossiping locals. By night, she hunched over a small desk in her cramped apartment, charcoal staining her fingers as she tried to sketch the life she wanted, not the one she had. Her dream was to be an artist, to have her own gallery show one day, but that dream was buried under a mountain of student loan debt and rent payments. Her one small point of interest in the daily grind was a man who came in every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. He always sat in the last booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl that nobody else wanted. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silvering hair at his temples and eyes that seemed to hold a gentle, weary wisdom. He never made a fuss. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee and a bowl of oatmeal. He read a physical newspaper, not a phone, and always left a $20 tip on a $7 bill. Clara didn't know his name, but she'd nicknamed him Mr. Croft in her head after a character from a novel she loved, a quiet, dignified man who saw the world for what it was. Her Mr. Croft was an island of calm in the diner's chaotic sea. He had an aura of quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. The way he dressed was simple but impeccably tailored: a cashmere sweater, perfectly pressed trousers. It was understated wealth, the kind you only recognize if you're looking for it. For months, their interactions were limited to a polite script. "The usual, sir?" she'd ask. He'd nod with a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Clara," he'd say, and the fact he'd bothered to learn her name meant more to her than the generous tip. Then about 2 months ago, everything changed. Mr. Croft started bringing a guest. The guest's name was Marcus Thorne. He was the polar opposite of Mr. Croft. Where the older man was reserved, Marcus was flamboyant. He wore expensive, flashy suits, a Rolex that caught the greasy diner light, and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. He called Mr. Croft Jules, a nickname that seemed jarringly informal. "Jules, my friend, you need to get out of these dives," Marcus would say, his voice a booming contrast to the diner's gentle hum. "Let me take you to the Pinnacle Club. Real food, real people." Mr. Croft, or Julian, as she now knew his name was, would just shake his head. "I like it here, Marcus. It's honest." Clara disliked Marcus from the moment she met him. It wasn't just his condescending attitude toward the diner. It was the way his eyes darted around, assessing everything and everyone, not with curiosity, but with calculation. It was the way he spoke to Julian when he thought no one was listening, a tone that was less friendly and more predatory. He was always pushing something: a deal, an investment, an opportunity. He spoke in grand, sweeping terms about paradigm shifts and disruptive technologies, but his gaze was cold and empty. Clara was an artist. Her gift wasn't just in her hands, it was in her eyes. She saw the subtleties of human expression, the micro-expressions that betrayed a person's true intentions. She saw the flicker of annoyance in Julian's eyes when Marcus interrupted him. She saw the flash of avarice in Marcus's face when Julian mentioned a successful quarter for his company. And she saw the way Marcus's charm was a carefully constructed mask. When he smiled at her, it never reached his eyes. It was the smile of a hunter studying its prey. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, a man whose philosophy was to never borrow trouble, had warned her. "Don't stare, Evans. The rich folk have their own rules. Just pour the coffee and take the tip." She tried to follow his advice. She really did. But every Tuesday and Thursday, she felt a growing knot of dread in her stomach as she watched Marcus Thorne slowly, methodically, lay a trap for her quiet, kind, regular customer. She didn't know the details, but she knew, with the certainty of an artist seeing a flawed composition, that something was terribly wrong, and she was the only one who seemed to see it. The Tuesday it all came to a head was a miserable one. A cold October rain lashed against the windows of the Silver Spoon, turning the world outside into a gray, blurry mess. The diner was mostly empty, the weather having kept most people home. The air was thick with the smell of damp coats and brewing coffee. Julian Croft and Marcus Thorne were in their usual booth. Today, however, the atmosphere between them was different. It was tense, charged. Marcus had brought a thick, leather-bound portfolio with him, and it lay open on the table between them. He was leaning forward, his voice low and urgent, while Julian leaned back, his face a mask of thoughtful concern. Clara was tasked with cleaning the booth directly behind them. The family with 3 screaming children had finally left, leaving behind a disaster of spilled milk and crushed crackers. As she sprayed and wiped the table, she tried to block out the conversation, minding her own business as Mr. Henderson always advised. But Marcus's voice, though low, had a piercing quality that cut through the diner's ambient noise. "The final paperwork, Jules. That's all we're waiting on," Marcus was saying. "The Helios project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Solar energy conversion at 90% efficiency. The patents are ironclad. We just need to finalize the capital injection before the end of the week." "It seems fast, Marcus." Julian's voice was calm, but Clara could hear the thread of unease woven through it. "My people at Croft Industries haven't finished their due diligence. They said they needed at least another 2 weeks to verify the technology." Marcus let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Your people are pencil pushers, Julian. They're paid to be cautious. They'll due diligence this thing into the ground until another consortium swoops in and snatches it from under our noses. I have it on good authority that a rival firm, Sterling Pierce, is already sniffing around. We have to move now. We sign tomorrow. We wire the funds by Friday. 50 million. It's the price of changing the world." Clara froze, her hand still holding the damp rag. $50 million. The number hung in the air, seeming to suck all the oxygen out of the room. It was an amount so vast, so abstract, it was meaningless to her. It was a lifetime of tips and minimum wage. "The account is set up through Thorne Capital, of course," Marcus continued, tapping a page in the portfolio. "It's a special holding company based in the Caymans to streamline international patent transfers. Standard procedure for a deal this size. It protects you from tax liabilities." "The Caymans," Julian murmured, his gaze distant. "That always complicates things." "It simplifies things, my friend," Marcus corrected smoothly. "It makes things clean. Look, I put my own money in, 5 million. I'm in this with you, shoulder to shoulder. Do you think I'd risk my own capital if I wasn't 100% certain? I'm giving you the chance to be my primary partner because of our history, because of our friendship." Clara risked a glance over the top of the booth. She saw Marcus place his hand on Julian's shoulder. It was meant to look like a gesture of camaraderie, but to Clara it looked possessive, like a predator marking its territory. Julian looked tired, worn down by Marcus's relentless pressure. The final piece clicked into place for Clara. She wasn't a financial expert. She didn't know what a holding company was or how patent transfers worked, but she knew the language of a con. She had seen it in smaller ways her whole life. The mechanic who invents a problem that isn't there. The landlord who finds a reason to keep the security deposit. It was a false sense of urgency. The appeal to emotion and friendship over logic. The dismissal of experts. And the mention of an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, which even she knew was a massive red flag. Marcus was isolating Julian from his advisors, creating a deadline out of thin air, and using their friendship as leverage. He wasn't a friend, he was a shark, and the blood was in the water. Her heart began to pound against her ribs. She felt a cold sweat on her brow. This wasn't her business. This was a world she didn't belong in. Intervening would be insane. She could be fired on the spot. Worse, a man like Marcus Thorne, He seemed dangerous. Who knew what he was capable of? She finished cleaning the table on autopilot, her mind racing. She could hear them getting up to leave. Marcus was clapping Julian on the back, his voice booming with false victory. "You're doing the right thing, Jules. I'll have my assistant send the final wire instructions to your office in the morning. To the future." Julian gave a non-committal grunt and walked towards the cash register, pulling out his wallet. Marcus lingered by the table, tucking the portfolio back into his briefcase. His eyes swept the diner, and for a horrifying second, they met Clara's. His charming smile didn't falter, but for an instant, she saw a glint of cold, reptilian calculation in his gaze. It was as if he knew she'd been listening, or maybe he just didn't care. To him, she was part of the furniture, invisible, irrelevant. That was his mistake. He thought she was nobody. But a nobody with a conscience is the most dangerous thing in the world to a man with no conscience at all. As Julian paid at the counter, leaving his customary 20, Clara made a decision. It was reckless. It was stupid. It could ruin what little she had, but she knew she couldn't live with herself if she stayed silent. The next 48 hours were a blur of anxiety for Clara. Thursday came, and she knew it was her last chance. She felt sick to her stomach all morning, her hands trembling so badly she spilled coffee on a customer's lap. She received a stern warning from Mr. Henderson, which only amplified her terror. At exactly 12:30 p.m., the bell above the diner door chimed. Julian Croft walked in alone. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. It was now or never. Marcus wasn't with him. This was her opening, a small window of opportunity that she had to seize. She grabbed a coffee pot, her knuckles white around the handle, and walked towards his booth. Her mind was a frantic whirlwind of what-ifs. What if he laughed at her? What if he thought she was a lunatic? What if he told Marcus, and Marcus came after her? "The usual, Mr. Croft," she managed to say, her voice barely a squeak. "Please, Clara," he said, looking up from his newspaper with that same tired, kind smile. "Call me Julian. And yes, please." She poured the coffee, her hands shaking so much that a little sloshed onto the saucer. "Sorry," she mumbled, fumbling with a napkin to wipe it up. "It's quite all right," he said, his eyes studying her with gentle concern. "Are you feeling okay today? You seem a little on edge." His kindness was almost her undoing. It was so much easier to be brave when you were angry, but his genuine solicitude made her feel the full weight of what she was about to do. She was about to shatter this man's trust in his friend, based on nothing more than a snippet of conversation and a bad feeling. She took a deep breath. "Sir, Julian," she began, her voice low and rushed. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy, and I'll probably lose my job for this, but I have to." He put down his newspaper, giving her his full attention. His brow furrowed. "What is it, Clara?" "It's about your friend, Marcus Thorne, and the Helios project." The change in his expression was immediate. The warmth vanished, replaced by a guarded, shuttered look. His posture stiffened. "I'm not sure that's any of your concern." "I know it isn't, sir." "I know," she pleaded, her words tumbling out. "But I overheard you both on Tuesday. I was cleaning the next booth. I heard him talking about the $50 million, the deadline, the holding company in the Cayman Islands, and I know it's not my place, but it sounded wrong." He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching her face, trying to discern her motive. "What do you know about international finance, Clara?" he asked, his tone not unkind, but laced with a profound skepticism. "Nothing," she admitted, feeling foolish. "I know nothing about finance, but I know people. I'm an artist, or I'm trying to be. I look at people all day. I see things. And when I look at Mr. Thorne, I don't see a friend. I see a salesman pushing a product he doesn't believe in. He talks about friendship, but his eyes are just full of numbers." She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a whisper. "He's rushing you. He's telling you to ignore your own advisors. He's using an offshore account that's designed to be untraceable. Please, sir, just wait. Just give your people the 2 weeks they asked for. That's all I'm asking. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll quit today and you'll never see me again." "But what if I'm not?" Julian stared at her, his face unreadable. The silence stretched for an eternity. The clatter of the diner seemed to fade away. She had said her piece. She had laid everything on the line. Now it was up to him. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet and heavy. What you're suggesting is a serious accusation against a man I've known for 20 years. I know, she whispered, her eyes stinging with tears of sheer terror. I'm so sorry. He picked up his coffee cup, his hand steady, and took a slow sip. He looked out the window at the bustling New York street, then back at her. The guarded expression was gone, replaced by something she couldn't quite decipher. It was a look of profound melancholy. Thank you, Clara, he said simply. He placed a $50 bill on the table. For the coffee. Then he stood up, leaving his oatmeal untouched, and walked out of the diner without another word. Clara stood frozen by the booth, the $50 bill lying on the table like a judgment. She hadn't been fired, but she hadn't been believed either. She had meddled in the affairs of giants and been dismissed with a quiet, polite thank you. As she watched him disappear into the crowd, a wave of despair washed over her. She hadn't saved him. She had just made a fool of herself and quite possibly put herself in terrible danger. That night she went home and, for the first time in years, she didn't even bother to take out her sketchpad. Clara slept fitfully, her dreams filled with Marcus Thorne's cold, smiling face and the sound of the diner door slamming shut. She woke up the next morning feeling hungover with dread, convinced that today would be the day Mr. Henderson would call her into his office and tell her she was fired. Julian had probably called the diner to complain about the crazy waitress who was harassing his guests. She trudged through her morning routine in a fog. Her apartment building, a rundown, pre-war walk-up in Queens, seemed grimmer than usual. The hallway smelled of old cabbage and damp concrete. She felt trapped, not just in the building, but in her life. Her grand, heroic gesture had amounted to nothing. As she was about to leave for her shift, a strange sight made her stop dead in her tracks. Parked directly in front of her building, in a space usually occupied by a rusted pickup truck, was a gleaming black Bentley Mulsanne. The car was so out of place in her neighborhood that it looked like it had been teleported from another dimension. Its polished chrome grille and glossy paint reflected the drab brick of her building, creating a surreal, distorted image. A man in a crisp black chauffeur's uniform stood beside the driver's side door. He was tall, stoic, and radiated an air of professional calm. People on the street were stopping to stare, some taking pictures with their phones. Clara's first thought was that she was on the wrong street. Then a cold, terrifying idea began to form in her mind. It was for her. Marcus Thorne had found out where she lived. This was a threat, a show of power. He had sent this car to intimidate her, to show her how small she was and how big his world was. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to run back inside, lock her door and hide. But before she could move, the chauffeur's eyes found hers. He didn't smile, but he gave a slight, formal nod. He began walking towards her, his polished shoes clicking purposefully on the cracked pavement. Clara braced herself. This was it. He was going to give her a message, a warning to keep her mouth shut. The chauffeur stopped a respectable 5 feet away from her. Miss Clara Evans? He asked, his voice a smooth, professional baritone with a hint of a British accent. Yes, she stammered, clutching the strap of her tote bag like a shield. My name is Arthur. I've been sent by Mr. Julian Croft, he said. He requests the pleasure of your company. He would like to speak with you privately. The relief was so sudden and so overwhelming that Clara felt her knees go weak. Julian, not Marcus. This wasn't a threat. But what was it? A summons? Was he going to berate her in person? Fire her from a distance? The car was a far cry from a simple phone call. He wants to see me? Now? She asked, bewildered. I have to get to work. Mr. Croft has already taken the liberty of speaking with your manager, Mr. Henderson, Arthur explained calmly. You have the day off, with pay. This was getting more surreal by the second. Julian Croft had called her boss. The sheer power implied by that simple act was staggering. Mr. Henderson would have likely bowed and scraped through the phone. Where are we going? To Mr. Croft's office, Arthur replied, gesturing towards the open rear door of the Bentley. The interior was a sea of plush cream leather and polished dark wood. It looked more like a private jet than a car. Clara looked down at her own attire, faded jeans, a worn-out band t-shirt, and scuffed sneakers. She was dressed for slinging hash, not for a meeting with a billionaire. "I can't go like this. I'm not dressed properly." Arthur's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were kind. "Mr. Croft was very specific, Miss Evans. He said to tell you he wishes to speak with Clara from the diner, not a version of Clara you think he expects to see. Please." She hesitated for another moment, her mind reeling. This was insane. 24 hours ago, she was a nobody, and now a car worth more than her entire apartment building was waiting to whisk her away to a meeting with one of the richest men in the city. The fear was still there, but it was now mingled with a powerful, burning curiosity. She had to know what he wanted. She had to know if her warning had made a difference. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay." As she slid into the impossibly soft leather seat, the door closing behind her with a silent, decisive click, she felt as if she were crossing a threshold into another world. The sounds of her noisy Queen's Street vanished, replaced by an insulated, luxurious silence. The car pulled away from the curb as smoothly as a ship leaving port. Looking out the tinted window, she saw her own shabby building recede into the distance, and she had the distinct feeling that she was leaving her old life behind, for better or for worse. The Bentley moved through the city like a phantom, the chaos of New York traffic parting before it with an almost magical deference. They crossed the Queensboro Bridge, and the iconic Manhattan skyline rose up to meet them. Clara had lived in New York her whole life, but she had only ever experienced it from the ground, from the crowded subways and trash-strewn sidewalks. From inside the Bentley, looking out at the city, it felt like she was watching a movie. The car didn't stop in the bustling financial district, as she expected. Instead, it headed towards Central Park South, pulling up in front of a tall, elegant limestone building with a discreet, canopied entrance. This wasn't an office building. It was one of the most exclusive and expensive residential towers in the world. Arthur opened her door. "Mr. Croft's primary office is on the penthouse floor, Miss Evans. It offers him the privacy he prefers." The lobby was a symphony of marble, bronze, and hushed reverence. A silent security guard nodded at Arthur as he escorted Clara to a private elevator. The ride to the top was silent and dizzyingly fast. When the doors opened, they didn't open into a hallway, but directly into a vast, breathtaking space. It was an office, but unlike any she could have imagined. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a 270-degree panorama of Central Park and the city beyond. The autumn colors of the park's trees spread out below them like a magnificent living carpet. The room was furnished with a mix of modern art, antique bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, and a large imposing desk made of a single slab of dark polished wood. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and money. Julian Croft was not at his desk. He was standing by the window looking out over the park, his hands clasped behind his back. He was dressed in a simple but elegant gray suit. He turned as she entered, and his face was grave. "Clara," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room, "thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to a pair of leather armchairs near the window. Clara sat down, feeling small and out of place. She perched on the edge of the cushion, her tote bag clutched in her lap. Arthur poured her a glass of water from a crystal pitcher and then retreated, closing the elevator doors behind him with a soft click, leaving them completely alone. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here," Julian began, sitting in the chair opposite her. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "Your warning," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "It came at a critical moment. The wire transfer for the Helios project was scheduled for this morning, $50 million. Clara held her breath. "After you spoke to me," he continued, "I couldn't shake what you said, not the financial details. You were right. You don't know anything about finance." It was what you said about his eyes. Full of numbers. "I've known Marcus Thorne for 2 decades. We came up in the business together. I considered him one of my closest friends. But friendship, I'm beginning to learn, can be a dangerous blind spot." He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Your words forced me to do something I should have done from the start. I put my personal feelings aside and I trusted my team. I called my head of security, a former MI6 agent named David Brown, and I asked him to do a deep dive investigation into Marcus Thorne and the Helios project. I told him to use any and all resources and to disregard the fact that Marcus was my friend. He paused, leaning forward. They worked through the night, Clara. What they found was ugly. The Helios project doesn't exist. The technology is fake, based on plagiarized and long-debunked academic papers. The patents are forgeries. The holding company in the Caymans was a shell corporation, and its sole director was Marcus himself. If I had sent that money this morning, it would have been instantly transferred through a dozen other accounts and vanished forever. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. To hear her vague suspicions confirmed in such stark, undeniable terms was shocking. $50 million. Gone. It was a complete fabrication, Julian said, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and betrayal. A meticulously crafted fraud designed for one purpose, to steal my money. My so-called friend was planning to rob me blind and disappear. He looked at her, his expression one of profound gratitude. You saved me, Clara. Not just my money. That's just paper. You saved me from the humiliation, from the fallout. Croft Industries is a public company. A scandal of this magnitude, revealing that its CEO could be so easily fooled, would have been catastrophic. Clara didn't know what to say. I just had a bad feeling. Your bad feeling was more accurate than a dozen of my own analysts who were being fed false data by Marcus, he said. Now I need your help one more time. My team is building a legal case against him, but he's slippery. Any detail you can remember from your interactions with him, no matter how small, could be useful. Anything you saw, anything you heard. This was why he'd brought her here, not just to thank her, but because she was a witness. She took a deep breath, pushing past her nerves. His briefcase, she said suddenly, the one he had the portfolio in on Tuesday. It was dark brown leather, very expensive. But there was a small detail I noticed. On the latch, the metal part, there was a logo etched into it. It was a snake eating its own tail. Julian's eyes widened. He immediately picked up his phone and spoke into it. David, I need you to run a search. The Ouroboros symbol. Check it against known shell corporations or entities linked to financial fraud. He listened for a moment, his expression hardening. I see. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Clara, a new level of respect in his eyes. The Ouroboros is the signature logo of a disgraced investment group that was dismantled for running a massive Ponzi scheme 10 years ago. The authorities could never pin anything on the masterminds. It seems one of them simply reinvented himself. As my friend, he stood up and walked back to the window. He will be dealt with. I will see to it personally. And it's all thanks to the waitress who paid attention. He turned back to her. Which brings me to the second reason you're here. A simple thank you is not enough. I owe you a debt I can never truly repay, but I intend to try. Tell me, Clara Evans, what is it you want most in this world? The question was so direct, so vast, that it stole her breath away. She looked around the magnificent room, at the city sprawling at her feet, and for the first time, the life she had only ever dared to sketch seemed like it could be real. Before Clara could answer Julian's momentous question, his phone buzzed with an urgent summons from his legal team. He apologized profusely, explaining that the situation with Marcus was developing rapidly and required his immediate presence downstairs. We are not finished, Clara, he said, his tone firm. Arthur will take you home. I will be in touch tomorrow. Please, think about my question. The ride back to Queens was even more surreal than the ride into Manhattan. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of images. The panoramic view from the penthouse, the chilling confirmation of Marcus's deceit, and Julian Croft's unbelievable question. What do you want most in this world? For years, the answer had been simple: to pay her bills, to have a moment's peace, to afford better quality canvases. But now the question felt limitless. Arthur dropped her off in front of her building. As the Bentley purred away, leaving her on the familiar, cracked sidewalk, the whole experience felt like a fever dream. Has it really happened? She decided to walk to the diner. Her shift didn't start for another hour, but she needed the grounding reality of her routine. She needed to feel the familiar weight of a coffee pot in her hand. When she walked into the Silver Spoon, she found Mr. Henderson frantically polishing the countertop, a nervous energy radiating from him. "Evans!" he exclaimed, his eyes wide. "That man, Mr. Croft, he called. A billionaire called my diner. Do you know who that was?" "I do, Mr. Henderson," she said quietly. "Whatever you do, keep doing it," he said, misinterpreting the situation entirely. "A man like that as a regular, this is good for business." Clara just nodded, not having the energy to explain. She tied on her apron and got to work, the familiar motions a welcome distraction, but her peace was short-lived. Around 4 p.m. during the late afternoon lull, the diner door swung open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Marcus Thorne stood framed in the doorway. He looked nothing like the suave, charming man she had seen with Julian. His expensive suit was rumpled, his silk tie was loosened, and his face was a mask of pure fury. His eyes, no longer holding a calculated coldness, now burned with a white-hot rage. They scanned the diner and locked onto her. Every head in the diner turned. Mr. Henderson froze mid-polish. Marcus strode directly towards her, his footsteps heavy and menacing. He stopped at the counter, leaning in so close she could smell the expensive, cloying scent of his cologne, now mingled with the faint odor of whiskey. "You!" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous snarl. "The little waitress? Nobody. What did you say to him?" Clara's blood ran cold. He knew. Julian must have confronted him, and he had put the pieces together. She backed away from the counter, her heart pounding in her ears. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me." He slammed his palm flat on the counter, making the salt shakers jump. "My accounts are frozen. My credit lines are cut. Julian won't take my calls. This all happened after he met with you, so I'll ask you again. What did you say?" Mr. Henderson, finally snapping out of his stupor, hurried over. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disturbing my customers." Marcus didn't even look at him. He swatted a hand in his direction as if shooing a fly. "Stay out of this, old man." He turned his venomous glare back to Clara. "You think you're clever, don't you? Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," he sneered. "You have no idea the kind of world you've just interfered with. You think he's your friend? Julian Croft? He'll use you and then he'll throw you away. People like you are just collateral damage to people like us." He leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I have lost $50 million because of you. Do you understand that? I will not forget this. Little girls who live in rundown apartments in Queens should be very, very careful. It's so easy to have an accident. A slip on the stairs, a faulty gas line. Nobody would even blink." The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Clara was paralyzed by fear. This was real. The danger she had worried about was standing right in front of her, breathing threats into her face. Just as he straightened up, a smirk twisting his lips, the diner door opened again. 2 large, impeccably dressed men stepped inside. They were built like refrigerators and moved with a quiet, efficient grace that spoke of extensive training. Clara recognized one of them from the lobby of Julian's building. They flanked Marcus Thorne, one on each side. The first man, who she now recognized as David Brown, Julian's head of security, spoke in a calm, level voice. "Mr. Thorne, I believe you've caused enough of a scene." Marcus spun around, his face paling slightly when he saw them. "Who the hell are you?" "We're the people Mr. Croft employs to take out the trash," Brown said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. "You're going to come with us now, quietly." Marcus scoffed, trying to regain some of his bluster. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Brown simply raised an eyebrow. "You can come with us, or you can have a conversation with the 2 NYPD detectives waiting in the car outside who have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud and conspiracy. The choice is yours, but either way, you're leaving." The fight drained out of Marcus's face, replaced by the slack-jawed shock of a man who has been comprehensively outplayed. He knew he was beaten. He shot one last, hate-filled glare at Clara, a silent promise of retribution that he would never be able to keep. Without another word, he allowed the 2 men to escort him out of the diner. They placed him in the back of a black sedan and drove away. The diner was deathly silent. Everyone was staring at Clara. She stood trembling behind the counter, the full weight of the past 2 days crashing down on her. She had warned the millionaire. She had been whisked away in a Bentley, and now she had been threatened by a world-class con artist who was just taken away by what amounted to a private security force. Mr. Henderson walked over, his face ashen. "Evans, maybe you should take the rest of the day off, with pay." Clara could only nod. She untied her apron, her hands shaking uncontrollably, and walked out of the Silver Spoon diner for what she knew somehow would be the very last time. 2 days later, Arthur and the Bentley were once again parked outside Clara's building. This time she wasn't surprised and she wasn't afraid. She was dressed a little better, in the nicest blouse she owned, and she met him at the curb with a quiet sense of anticipation. He drove her not to the penthouse but to a brownstone in the West Village. The door was opened by Julian Croft himself. He was dressed casually in slacks and a sweater, and the weary, betrayed look from their last meeting had been replaced by a calm, settled peace. "Clara," he said warmly, his smile genuine, "please, come in." The inside of his home was nothing like the intimidating office. It was warm, filled with books and art. Not the flashy, modern pieces from his office, but classic paintings, landscapes, and portraits that spoke of a deep, personal love for the craft. "I wanted to thank you again, in a more personal setting," he said, leading her to a comfortable living room overlooking a garden. "Marcus Thorne is in federal custody. He will not be bothering you, or anyone else, for a very long time. My security team has also arranged for a plainclothes detail to watch your apartment building for the next few months, just as a precaution. Your safety is my primary concern." Clara was stunned by his thoroughness. "Thank you, Julian. That's more than I could ever ask for." "Nonsense," he said, waving a hand. "It's the least I could do. Now, to the more pleasant matter. I asked you a question the other day, and I would like an answer. What do you want?" Clara took a deep breath. She had thought of nothing else for the past 2 days. She could ask for money. He would probably write her a check for $1 million without blinking, and it would solve all her problems. Her debt would vanish. She could buy a nice apartment, a car, but as tempting as that was, it felt hollow. It felt like a transaction, a tip for a service rendered. What she had done wasn't for a reward. "You saw my sketches, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "In my bag at your office." A small smile played on his lips. "I may have caught a glimpse. Your bag was open. I saw a sketch of a man reading a newspaper in a diner booth. It was very good. You captured his loneliness." Clara felt a blush creep up her neck. "That's what I want," she said, finding her voice. "That's the only thing I've ever really wanted. To be an artist, to have my own show, to stop sketching my dreams on napkins and actually paint them onto a canvas. But that takes time, and it takes money I don't have." "I see," Julian said, his eyes twinkling. He stood up and walked over to a small antique desk. He picked up a set of keys and a crisp, heavy-stock envelope. He handed them to her. "What is this?" she asked, her heart beginning to race. "The keys," he said, "are to a loft studio in Soho. It's one of my properties. It has been sitting empty for years. It has wonderful northern light. The lease is paid for the next 5 years. You can consider it your new workspace." Clara stared at the keys in her hand, speechless. A studio in Soho. It was an impossible dream. "And the envelope," he continued, "is not a reward. It is an investment. I am officially commissioning you for a series of paintings. Portraits of a city. 12 canvases. I want you to paint the real New York. The people in your diner, the street musicians, the quiet moments that people like me, in our glass towers, never get to see. I want you to show me the world through your eyes." She opened the envelope. Inside was a contract for the commission, and underneath it, a cashier's check made out to Clara Evans. The amount was for $250,000. Clara felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over, but they weren't tears of fear or anxiety. They were tears of overwhelming, incredulous joy. This wasn't a handout. It was a job. It was a chance. It was respect. "This is a stipend for your living expenses and art supplies for the next 2 years, Julian explained gently. "It will allow you to quit your job at the diner and dedicate yourself entirely to your art. When the collection is complete, we will host a gallery show. I will introduce you to the art world. I will be your first patron." He looked at her, his expression serious and kind. "You see, Clara, you have a gift, not just for art, but for seeing the truth in people. That is a rare and valuable thing. The world needs more people who see, not just look. I am not giving you a gift. I am making an investment in talent, and more importantly, in integrity. You reminded an old, cynical man that decency still exists. Now go and show the world what you see." Clara looked from the keys to the check, and then to the man standing before her. He hadn't just saved her from her life of debt and desperation. He had given her back the dream she had almost let die. He had given her a canvas and the key to a door she never thought would open. All because she had listened to her gut and dared to speak a quiet warning in a noisy diner. A year later, the scent of burnt coffee and grease was a distant memory, replaced by the sterile, clean aroma of a Chelsea art gallery. The space was all white walls, polished concrete floors, and soaring ceilings, with track lighting that made the canvases on the walls seem to glow from within. A sophisticated murmur filled the room, punctuated by the clinking of champagne flutes and the thoughtful hum of appraisal. This was the opening night of Portraits of a City, the debut solo exhibition by Clara Evans. Clara stood near the entrance, a vision in a simple black dress, feeling as if she were watching a scene from someone else's life. She watched as critics, collectors, and art lovers moved from piece to piece, their expressions ranging from intense scrutiny to dawning admiration. These were her paintings, her vision, her truth. There on the main wall was Silver Spoon at Dawn, a loving, melancholic portrait of the diner, the morning light cutting through the greasy windows and illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Further down was Subway Sleeper, a charcoal and oil piece capturing the exhausted vulnerability of a man in a rumpled suit, asleep on the D train. Another, Washington Square Serenade, showed a lone guitarist, his eyes closed in passion, his open case holding only a few coins. She had painted the New York she knew, the gritty, the tired, the beautiful, and the profoundly human. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Julian Croft, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked relaxed and genuinely happy, the weight of the corporate world seemingly lifted from his shoulders. "I believe a toast is in order," he said, handing her a glass. "To the artist of the hour. They love it, Clara. They see what I saw." Clara took a sip, the bubbles tickling her nose. "I still can't believe this is real, Julian. A year ago, I was wiping up spilled milk." "And observing," he corrected gently. "That is what you were doing. You were collecting all of this." He gestured around the room. "The money, the studio, that was just the catalyst. This," he said, his voice full of admiration, "is all you." His eyes drifted to a specific painting hanging in a place of honor. It was a simple composition, a man's hands, weathered and strong, resting on a newspaper next to a steaming cup of black coffee. It was titled Tuesday, Thursday. "That one has already sold, you know," Julian said with a quiet smile. "It did?" Clara asked, surprised. "To who?" "To me," he replied. "I bought it this morning before the doors even opened. I needed a permanent reminder of the importance of honest work and of the day my perspective was saved by a waitress with the eyes of an artist." He looked at her, his expression sincere. "You know, for years, my life was about numbers on a screen, gains, losses, percentages, abstract value. You deal in real value, Clara. You capture moments of truth that are more valuable than any stock portfolio. What you gave me wasn't just a warning. It was a window back into the world I had forgotten to see." A woman in a sharp suit approached them, introduced herself as a critic from a major art publication, and began asking Clara insightful questions about her technique and inspiration. As Clara answered, her voice steady and confident, Julian stepped back, content to watch. He saw not the nervous, terrified young woman from the diner, but a self-assured artist, confidently commanding her space, her dream made manifest on the walls around them. The real reward, Clara realized as she spoke, wasn't the studio or the money. It was this. It was the breathtaking privilege of finally showing the world what she saw, and in doing so, finally showing the world and herself, who she truly was. And so, Clara Evans's life was changed forever, not by a winning lottery ticket or a fairy tale romance, but by a single act of courage. Her story is a powerful reminder that the most profound changes in our lives often come not from seeking a reward, but from doing the right thing, simply because it is the right thing. Julian Croft was saved from financial ruin, but more than that, he reconnected with the real world through Clara's eyes. And Clara, in return, was given more than money. She was given the one thing she truly craved, the chance to pursue her passion with purpose. Her integrity was her greatest asset, and it paid a dividend she could never have imagined. What do you think of Clara's decision? Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone that turned out to be right? Let us know your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will inspire and amaze you. Thank you for listening.